So everybody knows everybody's least favorite film critic is Adolf Hitler. The person who famously hated the movie that we're going to talk about today.
And art critic. He considered himself an art critic too.
But that didn't stop him from actually viewing the film after he had it banned. He watched it twice after receiving a print from Charlie Chaplin, kept it banned, and we will never know his thoughts, nor do we really care, because this is the movie that skewers him better than perhaps anyone else.
Charles Chaplin finally recorded his first in-sound film.
Yeah, so join us for The Great Dictator. Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks again for finding this. Thanks again for watching. And for our loyal fans, really, thank you for continuing to support the show. You can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. Yes, we do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great deals and some great content and an opportunity to tell us what movies we can review in the future. Both Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out that webpage for critics' reviews as well as ours. And we're talking about, I think, is a staple for essential film viewing. It's The Great Dictator.
Yes. So 20 years after fighting in World War I, a Jewish barber comes home to find his shop in tatters and his country radically changed by a ruling dictator, Adnoid Hinkle, looking to exterminate the Jews. As the barber and his new friends avoid the stormtroopers, a former fellow soldier sees an opportunity to replace Hinkle with the barber, who greatly resembles him.
So this came out in 1940, just a year before America would go into World War II. And there was a lot of hesitancy to do this because there wasn't so much that Hollywood wasn't embracing Adolf Hitler. It was so much like, why do we have to do this? And I think Charlie Chaplin is a little bit ahead of what we later find out was going on.
Yeah, because the film started production in 1937. Basically, the kernel of the idea happened that Chaplin and another filmmaker were watching Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will, which is one of those very, very famous Nazi documentaries, and kind of had this nugget of ideals of like, something's not quite right here at the time. And this was back in the mid-30s when things were starting to boil, but not really overflowing into the problem.
No, we haven't gotten into they haven't had the World Olympics in Berlin yet.
Yeah, and so Chaplin had this idea about kind of mocking this unusual man who I think part of it probably had to do with the mustache.
It always, that's what I've heard about the story, is the spark was well, you almost look like him. And, and Charles like, he stole my mustache.
I think that's how it's played out in the Chaplin film that starred Robert Downey Jr. as well, was kind of that like connection there. What's interesting is, like in 1937 when production began, it was a very different landscape than when 1940 happened and the film finally came out. And he even said in his autobiography, Chaplin said, had I known where this was headed, I wouldn't have made the movie. Because I just don't know that I could have tried to mine comedy from this situation.
Right. A little more ignorant, but you're kind of forecasting what's happening. If you understand, if you started filming in 1937, this film came out in 1940, it is a big production movie.
Yeah.
It's one of his big ever productions, and Charlie Chaplin wasn't afraid to go big production, wasn't afraid to go ahead of the game also. We like to think of Charlie Chaplin as kind of a classic comedian, but he is always going a little bit ahead of what was considered the passe at the time.
Yeah.
He's always challenging what is comedy.
And he was always challenging himself for what he could perform. In fact, the only thing that I really ever felt that he just flat out didn't want was the talkies. You know, and as those films kind of started to become more prevalent, he kept doing the silent stuff into that period, and almost gave up and quit acting before deciding this would be his first
one, but not his last movie, his first full featured talking film. And like you said, when we're recording, he did a couple short films, experimental short films with talking, just to see how I sound or what if he appreciated. Right.
Yeah, and there was a little bit of like, he also had these filmed short documentaries. We're not sure if they were like specifically for him and his family, but they made their way out into the world where there was talking as well. So he was always kind of like experimenting with the ideas, but it seemed he seemed so dead set on he is not going to be a talkie. In fact, he even maintained that the character of the Jewish barber in this film is not the tramp. His notable, lovable character is not the character in this film, because he vowed that the tramp would never appear in a talking picture. And so he said, this isn't the tramp. This is another guy that just happens to look like him.
Well, Charlie liked to always use visual stunts and usually goes against the grain of what is always happening. Case in point, you have at the beginning of the movie this big, immaculate, powerful gun contrasts with this little weasel guy who's pulling the trigger.
Yep.
And he's just,
and he's purposely like doing it really kind of like without any weight, without any circumstance at all.
Yeah. So it's always a counterintuitive to the big scene.
Mm-hmm.
So you have very gallant scenes, but then you have him being almost a clownish, almost fumbling.
Yeah.
While everybody else has chivalry and ethics and everything, and he's just, picking his food or whatever. Like
Yeah.
that.
And it always catches me off guard, that opening scene, because I can never remember where it's going. That whole 1918 portion, basically.
I'm pretty sure the beginning. I've
time.
seen this many times. I'm pretty sure the beginning of this movie, the whole trench is just one big circle, and they're bombing each other.
Oh, probably. Yeah.
I think the whole.
As they're firing the gun, though, I forget every time where that shell is going to end up and how it's going to play out. In fact, Chaplin's son ruined the first take because he laughed at where the shell ends up on the ground. He laughed at it, and you couldn't really fix that.
This is a sound film. We're not supposed right. We can't know. Right. Yeah. And it's impressive production. That's a big, real thing they made.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's maybe not to the level of modern times, but it's certainly like... That's the thing about it is, usually when you view a Chaplin film, I remember Chaplin from a lot of shorts. I remember a lot of his features. Most of them run that like 80 to 90 minutes because sometimes you get that sensation that there's only so much you can do with the visual gag of it all, and you may start to lose your audience if your film runs on long. This, I think, is his longest film at 2 hours and 5 minutes, and it's... It just flows so quickly that you forget that you're watching a 2-hour movie.
Yeah, because it starts kind of like World War One, but it's not the authentic World War One. These are made up countries. But if I remember, he directed it and wrote this by himself.
Yep.
And then stars Paula Gardner. And the true fact, Paula Gardner actually was cast to be Scarlett O'Hara. She was, I think, actually said, "You have the job," until Vivian Leigh came in audition, and they said they took it away from her. So it was almost that close for Paula Gardner to be catapulted into superstardom.
Would that have been before or after she got in with Chaplin?
I
Probably
think
slightly before.
Right.
Because he tended to bring people into his circle and keep them there. You
Yeah.
know?
So that's always scoured Paula Gardner's career, because she came this close for playing Scarlett O'Hara, and then it got swept up from her. But she does marvelous work in here. When she get, I think the first time you see her, they throw tomatoes at her.
Yeah, she's kind of standing up against... she is very much a heroic character, because the barber, he's a hero, but he's a bumbling, he's a soft-spoken, we view the strong characters of the 80s, our Arnold Schwarzenegger, she's essentially doing that. She's standing up from the moment we see her against this rising tide.
And you like to think camera, for comedies, is just going to set the camera and just go. But they have a lot of crane shots, a lot of tracking shots to make it look comical. And to use it effectively. I mean, obviously you have one stand-in where they make a sculpture of his face, and he comes in for 2 seconds and then leaves.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. Bye. Yeah.
But it's a movie that you don't look and you don't think about all the things that go into each of those shots as you're watching it. Yeah. And I think that's the most special thing, is it's one of those movies where, like a lot of Chaplin films, you can look at the background and be just as amazed when you learn how the magic trick was done. I oftentimes think it was City Lights, where he's doing the roller skating near the giant pitfall, and you realize it was a forced perspective thing back in the 40s, or the 30s. And then this kind of film too, there was just things like how these long sequences went, like when the plane goes upside down. Yeah. When you look at the behind the scenes of that had to have been an awful day on camera.
But it crashes, and the joke is it's not even really effective. It's almost like cartoon comedy.
Yeah.
Before cartoon comedy, of them still having the conversation even after they crash upside down.
Yeah, it's very Looney Tunes-esque, of that time period. Yeah.
Almost like you can't get hurt, but it's still funny to see. I would venture to say you can't make this movie without the Marx Brothers, who did in 1933 Duck Soup, which was a political, made-up country, all talking about war start over petty stuff. Yeah. And this is not so the take of that version, but this is a version of making people who are idealized, the cult of personalities, how ridiculous they are. Mm-hmm. Even though he does that non-English jibber-jabber fake German stuff.
Yeah, you can hear a lot of like schnitzels and things where he's like throwing any word that is German or sounds remotely German, but not in a actual cohesive language. I'm learning German right now, so I was thinking to myself, I have a lot of work to do. But then I realized.
And then how the cameras interact with him, they slap him and, or they spin or whatever. Yep. And that's very authentic Chaplin. It's the decision of what you think is real, but it's not. It's fake. All of a sudden, you realize the microphone might be made out of licorice or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the deceivement that he likes to play. He's a magician. He worked in vaudeville. He knows how to do the gags, and that's why his clothes sometimes are overbearing. This is kind of weird because his clothes always fit him in this movie.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then even as the barber, the tramp costume is a little bit more trimmed. It's a little bit more tight than what it would be. So it's kind of, you can kind of see that whole element of like, it's not the tramp. This is just a persona. But it's interesting to note that, yeah, he kind of skirted around this idea of directly hitting the Nazi party.
Right.
You know the
party
Nazi
of the
thing
double
is like,
cross.
yeah, the two double crosses. The fact that it's Adenoin Hinkel instead of Adolf Hitler. He rides the line where you know what these people are. That Garbage is Goebbels.
Goebbels, yeah.
Herring is Hermann Goering. Benzino Napoloni is Benito Mussolini. They invade Austria, but it's really Austerlich. Like, he goes around it to the point where he just barely avoids the true tragedy of what it is in order to poke fun at the villain. It's almost like the progenitor of what Mel Brooks would do, where he said, as a Jewish comedian, you had to punch the people that were most hateful. That's the only way you could defeat someone like Hitler, is to punch them
instead of punch down. You punch up. Right. And this is a year before, this is 1940, this is a year before Citizen Kane, when in the very scene of news and footage of Citizen, Hearst talking to Adolf Hitler, and I don't believe we're going to go to war. He doesn't want war. And this is all, we're just getting fed what's happening by headlines. I mean, we get internet now, but you understand, not much information was happening we're getting out very much.
Yeah.
It was very guarded what's going on in Germany, very much rumors or something like that. So his perception of how to make the movie was just based on maybe speculative what is happening. Yeah,
and he was criticized because his films tended to do very well in America, and he was criticized for like, well, Americans don't know what's going on out of the country, like they don't really care. Right. And this film actually ended up being his most commercially successful, because by the time the film was coming out, Americans had kind of caught up with something isn't right in Europe right now, and so it ended up becoming a very popular film, one that he financed all the way by himself, which is proof is pudding. Is if you've got the money and you want to make your movie, I guess make your movie, because sometimes you'll come up with something like this.
And he wasn't the only one. I mean, it came out at the same time that comic books were fighting Nazi Germany before the government was, because we had Captain America and we had Superman fighting the Nazis before we got involved. So there was kind of this, we kind of know what's going on, not really for sure yet.
Yeah, because I mean, even that 9 months prior to this film came out, we actually had a Three Stooges film called You Nazi Spy that came out just before this movie, and again, that was a case of like, oh crap, like the energy is going to be on that film, and that film proved to be popular, but not nearly as much as this film. And I think part of it is because of that whimsical way that he attacks. I mean, the film has two iconic scenes, and the first one is, of course, Hinkle with the inflatable Earth, spinning it up.
That's a very iconic scene of him trying to balance the world, almost like he's playing with the world.
Yeah, he's kind of his own atlas, if you will, holding it up. The ironic thing is that he's actually spinning it on its axis backwards, and I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it feels like something that he would say, like, this man doesn't understand the world that he is presuming to rule over. Yeah. And then, of course, and then he matches that comedic scene with the other most famous scene in the film, which is the finale speech, which is incredibly unfunny in so many ways.
And we'll get to that in my review. But I understand, and a lot of people I didn't even know he was very popular. A lot of people in Hollywood didn't really like Charlie Chaplin. If you're talking personal life as too, kind of a personal life. But W.C. Fields always regarded him as, I'll replace the word fancy. He was just that fancy ballet dancer.
Yeah.
That's what W.C. Fields called them. So, yeah, up next is our review of The Great Dictator. Okay, this was an option for me when I was in film class in the film school in the 90s. One of the options of three criteria, I could see The General or this one, or I can't remember the other one. It was option choice, pick those three, and this was an option. I don't know if I would show this in a film class. I would say I would do also this. It's a recommended option. I wouldn't force them, but I say this is another. Maybe you want to take a look at it. Not so much required.
Yeah.
Filming, because it's very dangerous ground to do so.
Yeah, I think if you had, like, I always think to myself, if there was a dangerous film class, which I think is an important class to take, but it's also one that
the riskers,
you should be kind
of risk takers.
Yeah. I felt very much like how Blazing Saddles attacked racism, or even how Mel Brooks attacked like Nazism in the producers in a smaller role, or
Right.
you know,
but
it
that
kind
was
of like
20 years after.
yeah, we wouldn't see that at the time, but we wouldn't have things like Jojo Rabbit today. You know, without this movie, we wouldn't have Life is Beautiful in
No, I'm
1987.
going to back up because I'm not saying it's not safe to show people. What I'm saying is it's hard to perceive how it was when it came out.
Yes.
We can understand the comedy now because we're almost 90 years removed from it. But to show it even before World War II happened was a big risk, and he invested a lot into it paying off. And it didn't pay off initially. It took a long time. We understand so a lot of films that become great films are not really regarded that way immediately.
Yeah.
This took a long try, even after maybe the 50s in some aspect of people appreciating this movie.
Yeah, because you have to think to yourself, in worst case scenario, if we had lost World War II, and if that monster was allowed to continue his reign
We would
of
never see
terror,
the light of day.
like if we even had a country at that point,
Right.
this film would not be a popular film to have around. It would be a difficult film to even watch because and again, like we're talking about major issues here, but we're really talking about a movie. That's our show. That's what we're going to talk about. But
Right.
it's interesting that the film would be his only Best Picture nomination, the only one that he would kind of make that would achieve that kind of acclaim. And yet, when you look at what it lost to, like I like Hitchcock's Rebecca.
Yeah,
but
and that's not even close to Hitchcock's best film.
Yeah, like this film obviously should have won when you look at those nominations that it was there. Like, but again, that's always the passage of time. The movie that wins today is not the movie that would have won today.
It takes a long time to get accolades.
Yes.
Because you realize everybody's probably expecting the Little Tramp and everything, but when you do parody, it's tough. It has to almost age like wine.
Yeah.
To get appreciated.
Well, and there's some incredibly dangerous or risky material in the film. I mean, Hinkle goes as far as to make jokes about exterminating all brunettes. Like, it's a heavy hitting joke that's funny in the moment, but it also carries with it that exponential weight that can make it so difficult to watch at the same time. It's that whole thing of if he's not hitting Hinkle as kind of a man who doesn't understand the world, and if he doesn't hit it that right, it's going to look terrible.
But the whole point of him switching roles from the Jewish barber and the dictator, but that's the same person, to show him that you can come from any background, and it's just how you sell the perception.
Yeah.
It's deceiving, right? You're buying into it wholesale, a fraud.
Yeah. Kind of, how these two people look identical, seem to have the identical genes, and yet have taken such drastically different paths in their lives.
And the perception, all you do is switch their clothes, and you respond differently, but it could be the same person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the gag. I think that's the whole point of what he's trying to demonstrate. I really love the ending of this. I think it's it's not a comedic ending to it. It's not the punch Gabby, Three Stooges, but he goes old-fashioned Hollywood dramatic piece at the end.
Yeah.
Which sells it.
He breaks the fourth wall.
He breaks the fourth wall. And it's almost devastating because the lighting's all very like a noir lighting scope. It's just absolutely devastating. For something you thought we're going to get a jovial ending to this, and it doesn't go that way. But he sells it hardcore Hollywood ending that fits perfect for something that's been starched black and white throughout the whole thing.
Yeah. And I think that was a choice he made as filming went on. I think it was when the invasion of France began.
Yeah.
That he changed the ending and realized I need to have some hope. I need to show where this film stands at the end in case people don't understand where I'm coming from for the first hour and 40 minutes. And I think it's that case,
Dramatic lighting and all that aspect. He goes old-fashioned in the studio ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I go back to it. I mean, when you mix the ball scene with this scene, and you think to yourself, how did he balance these tones so very well? Because he's always had a tenderness and a sweetness to his tramp character, but that's about as far as the drama goes in any of those other films. It's all heavy comedy.
I would say he's a master, as you just said, at keeping the tone.
Yep.
No matter how ridiculous and stupid it is, the tone stays the same.
Yeah, he really. I can't get over the fact that when I've watched things like The Gold Rush. The Gold Rush is one of my favorite movies of all time. And then things like The Circus, Modern Times, City Lights, all these different films that they have the same central character to them, but each one of them kind of has a different path it takes, and he's so good at tone. the entire time through all those films, and this is his biggest swing is when he realizes I've got to make this film about something at the end, which is really tough to do, and we tend to forget about all the other great sequences in the film because of those two well-known ones.
You put all those slices of montages of great scenes of cinema, and you put that in there, right? Balancing them. But I think he is very effective at understanding tone does not have to match theme. Mm-hmm. This shows the theme is just devastating.
Yeah,
but the tone is different to it, and Modern Times is a little bit like that too. Tone and theme does not have to match at all. Take note, Zack Snyder.
Yeah.
Tone and theme does not have to match.
Well, one thing I was going to mention too, and the reason why I have this wonderful Criterion edition of The Great Dictator that is chock full of extra special features.
Yeah.
That is the first time I watched the film was when I bought this edition at a Barnes & Noble. I was going through this period where I was like, I'm going to pick films from directors I haven't seen as much of.
Right.
And at this time, I'd only seen The Gold Rush. So I'd only seen like one flavor of Chaplin. And to watch this film for the first time, not even fully understanding until I started watching it, that wait, he made a movie about Hitler? I hadn't even connected that.
I didn't know until the 90s.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so watching it for the first time and realizing, well, I think at the time it was probably like 2016, 2017. My God. Like, how is this movie not talked about as being like one of those most influential films of all time? And it's because it does kind of carry that weight with it too. It's difficult.
And then one of the things is it's hard to laugh at because we know what comes after this movie was made.
Yeah, so much so that, like I mentioned, he almost would have, if he could have gotten in a time machine, he might have unmade the film from existing.
Yeah.
But I think it was a necessary piece of art to create.
I do too. I do too. Just comes with a little forewarning.
Yeah, because I do think it's a harsh film. It's kind of like how Blazing Saddles is one where it's like you maybe got to warn your friends before you watch.
I know it's not like Tommy Boy where you watch Tommy Boy and you're like, I want to watch that again. It's not that kind of comedy.
The popcorn is in my hand the whole time for Tommy Boy, but this is a movie where like, I'd probably have to give all my buddies at movie night a little heads up.
Right. So please keep the conversation going. Put a comment down below. What do you think of the Charlie Chaplin films? So we continue the conversation with Charlie Chaplin films. What do you think about The Great Dictator? Should we go the path of more comedies, more parodies? Let us know.
Yeah, especially from this time period. We haven't talked a lot of comedy from this time period. It's all been.
It's
really
hard to talk
stuff.
comedy because comedy's more of a reaction kind of a movie.
Yeah. So we have to really
comedy.
dive into the backgrounds and how they've influenced the comedy, I guess. But this is one where the background is infamously part of the conversation. So, thank you guys for joining us, and thank you for commenting, for liking, for subscribing. We really do appreciate it. Make sure that you check out all those links down below in the description, as Nick pointed out.
And once again, buy a copy of it.
Buy a copy, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait till July. Barnes & Noble does the 50% off sale. I know I'll be there. You can get it then, too. And then make sure you check out all of my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
Anybody from Barnes & Noble that wants us to...
If you want to support the show.
Yeah. We'll also, yeah. And you can find my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts.